Hello, this is Dr. Julie Lesnick. What you might not know about me is that my sun sign is in Aries, my moon sign is Cancer, and most importantly, my rising sign is in Capricorn. See, I'm here to tell you that Earth is starting to rise into Capricorn, and this is very bad indeed. Now is a time for taking positive actions, making tough decisions, seeing what needs to be done, and doing it. You can save the planet by tuning in and listening to the Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea podcast. I know this is all very difficult, but nobody ever said that doing tough stuff wasn't tough.
Hi there, this is Jeff. I'm with my friend Bryan, and we'll be talking about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in all its forms. But before we do that, let's listen to a message from one of our proud sponsors.
Hello, and welcome, and welcome. Hello, and welcome to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. This episode is brought to you by the whole sort of general mishmash. Where you create your own universe. Simply by your own universe. Simply by receiving it. To Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. If you live in a non-linear universe, we apologize for the inconvenience.
Hey Bryan, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing great, Jeff. How about you?
Well, I'll tell you now how I feel, but when we get to the very end, I'm going to change it to something that can't possibly be true.
All right. I think you're trying to allude to something there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh my gosh. We're talking about Quintessential Phase today, huh?
Yes, the radio series version of Mostly Harmless.
Right.
And like the other phases, this is going to start out with a narrative, voiceover setting up the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with the anything that happens.
Right.
But it stops there. And then it breaks off. And then it comes back and does half of the second part. And then it breaks off. And then it does the whole second part. And then it breaks off. And then it does the third part.
Yep.
So if you were unfamiliar with that opening from the book or that part from the book, would you have understood that at all?
No, not in the way that they laid it out, but because we are so familiar with it, we knew exactly what was going on. I mean, it's interesting. The Quintessential Phase, just like some of the previous phases of the radio show, tends to do a little bit more and a little bit less at the same time.
Yes. Well, one of the things I like best about listening to these radio shows, the ones that were produced after the books, is to see what things they eliminate that they didn't feel even needed to be stated.
Mm-hmm.
What things they add an explanation to that the book was unclear on.
Okay.
And what things that they rearrange how it happened to condense the story to fit into the format.
Yes, exactly.
And I believe they do all of those things in this one, just like always.
They do indeed. Mm-hmm.
Also, in the beginning, when they're breaking up the anything that happens part, they do mention the impossibility of faster than light travel, and they introduce the traveling by bad news.
Right. Which I thought was funny before in the book, and they did a pretty good job here in the radio show of relating that particular story.
And something that was a little more current to the time this was released, I did like that instead of calling this the Guide Mark II, because nobody uses that terminology anymore, they called it the Guide Version 2 Pro. So they had I thought that was pretty funny.
Yep.
And it will pop up and do ads periodically through the show. It will just pop up and do an ad.
Yep. Yep, I did think that was pretty funny. I also thought it was interesting that right at the beginning, I mean, they didn't even get too much into the story before they even mentioned our favorite prophet, Zarquan.
Yes, right, yeah, right at the beginning.
That was in reference to the wars that were going to happen inevitably, and just was a kind of a nod to Zarquan's eventually showing up.
Correct.
Okay, so the story starts with the discussion of the war that the Grebulons were going to fight.
Right.
And the Grebulon ship and what happens to it. And I did find that it was interesting because it was one of those questions we asked about the technology and what knew when, where. But in the radio show, they simply say the ship found the planet and landed and decided to monitor Earth. Or, well, we find out later that it's Earth.
Right.
So the Grebulons themselves aren't responsible for landing and picking the planet. The ship itself did that. At least that's the way they say it in the radio show.
Right, which makes more sense because I kept asking how could they possibly do anything
Right,
if they've
they
lost
no
their
clue.
minds. Yeah,
Exactly. And oh my gosh, I kept, every time they had an interaction with the Grebulons in the radio program, I laughed because I'm not sure what it was that I kept thinking about, but the way they had them popping in and out made me think of, I don't know, the Muppets or something like that, where they, they're barely able to retain enough attention span to pay attention to the conversation.
Well, I felt that their banter and their portrayal was very similar to the Thermians from Galaxy Quest.
Oh, yes. That's a beautiful example. That's a good example of what I was thinking.
Because that's all I could hear when they were going was I just kept hearing the Galaxy Quest aliens talking to Tim Allen.
Right. And I kept thinking of Fraggle Rock and Beaker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It was kind of a blend of those two things.
Oh my gosh. It was funny.
So one of the things that I wondered if they would eliminate, that they did not eliminate, was the line, "No one will ever know for sure where the Grebulons came from or exactly what it was they wanted." Because again, they're going to tell us that exactly, so this "no one will ever know" just is kind of a, like, you had the chance to change it. You could have.
Right.
You've changed so many other things.
Right.
Why couldn't you could change just a slight little bit. Keep the feeling of it. No one knows. Not ever know.
Right.
At this moment in time.
Right. And we're told basically that Trillian has determined who they were, where they came from, and what war they were about to fight, because she was on her way to the scene where the battle was supposed to take place in whatever time or space that was when she got rerouted to Earth. And of course, that's later in the story.
Right.
But
yeah,
she knows
she
where
does
they
know.
came from and what they intended to do.
Yeah. So then the story jumps to Arthur on Now What.
Right.
And if you remember, he did not appear until chapter 7 of the book.
Right.
Here they do the jokes about the bog hogs and the late president whose suicide crime scene photo is the official portrait retouched with crayon. They kept all of that.
Yes.
One of the things I wondered is there's no other pictures of this guy? Like they didn't have one when he was in office before he committed suicide?
Well, I think the intention here was no one really wanted the job,
right?
But he was standing in the right place at the right time. So they gave it to him.
And then he killed himself.
Yep.
Before they could take a picture.
Right, exactly.
So Arthur's obviously trying to get off of Now What because it is not a very pleasant place. And his guide is acting up, and he's kind of showing the relocation officer. So he knows something's going on because it's just being screwy, so he can't even use that to find a place to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the relocation officer is a telepath.
Right.
And
that was funny.
Yeah, it takes Arthur a while to realize how this guy possibly knows so much about him. And so Arthur explains that he would like to relocate to somewhere where the people kind of look like him, but he knows that he doesn't have any skills to offer.
Right.
It's like the relocation officer is fumbling through an index and he's looking and he's kind of mumbling to himself and he says, simple culture, low unemployment, picnic food, because he talked about making a sandwich.
Yep. I did like that. I made a note about that.
Right.
Picnic food.
Yeah. So do you remember what the relocation officer told Arthur when Arthur said that Bartledan looked boring?
No, I don't.
He said, I was going by appearances. So he looked at Arthur. Arthur wanted to be somewhere that looked like him, and he put him somewhere boring.
Oh, there you go. I measured it up pretty quickly.
Yes, he did. So about this part, they start introducing the concept of parallel universes.
Mm-hmm.
And it is said to be incomprehensible and not parallel.
Right.
They also introduce the Wuzagum, or the whole sort of general mishmash.
Right.
And it also does the bit about all the gods coming into existence 1/3 millionth of a second after the universe began.
Uh-huh.
Is that the Planck length time you were speaking about?
Planck time? Oh, no.
About a 3 millionth
that's
of a second?
many billions of Planck times later.
Okay. So a 3 millionth of a second is many billion Planck times.
Oh gosh, yes. It's like you say, it's incomprehensible time-wise. And the only other thing I thought about, whether this just observationally, when they talk about the Big Bang, we kind of think of it as an explosion, and it takes up a volume of space, okay?
Right.
But the Big Bang is really an explosion of space. So nothing existed, not even space,
Right.
prior to the explosion of space. And
Right.
when you talk about incomprehensible, I mean, that in itself is incomprehensible.
Yes, it is. So in the book, Zaphod doesn't exist at all as a character except for a couple of mentions. But here he makes an appearance in a flashback at the party where he met Trillian.
Yes. And it's funny. I just love the way they portray him here as doing all these kind of techniques and trying to pick up lines that he's got. And
Right.
One of the ones he says to Trillian is, you must be a laser because someone put you on stun, honey.
Yes, right.
Again, I love it. Star Trek references.
Well, not just that, but said on stun, but they also beamed straight out of the party. It was, hey,
that's
Eddie,
true.
Beam us up. And so he got beamed up out of the party with Trillian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they laid in heavily on the Star Trek stuff and on different little pieces of this, the radio show.
Yes. And one of the things that I really liked and I thought was very clever is that Trillian is played by the actress from the radio series.
Right.
And Trisha McMillan is played by the actress from the TV show and is said to be blonder and more American. Which is exactly right. So it's perfect that we've got two voices of Trillian in our head, the TV series and the radio show, and they both get to be in this. So I thought that was very clever.
It is clever.
So when we jump to Trisha in New York, they do a whole lot of condensing to just speed through this part of the story.
Yes, they do.
Obviously, I am happy that they cut out all of that meaningless, tedious conversation.
Oh, I made a special note of just that.
Could you imagine having to listen to that?
Oh, gosh.
On a radio show?
Uh-huh. I knew you'd like that.
Oh, absolutely I did. She's meeting Gail Andrews at Club Alpha, not the hotel bar.
Right. I thought that was interesting, too. It was a good choice.
But the owner, Stavro, is not there today.
No.
He's in London for the opening of his second club next week. So here is how they threw all the clues that you would need to figure out the ending.
Right.
And then we get to hear the flashback of Trisha McMillan at the party, who did not go off with Zaphod because she went back for her bag.
Right, and it's a whole different list of bad pickup lines.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Oh.
However, Zaphod left the party alone, not
Right.
with Arthur.
Well, to each his own, Jeff.
Well,
to each his own.
I would have fallen off my chair if that would have been part of it.
I did get a kick out of the part where they're talking about Rupert and the Grebulons, and that they have chosen to look at their iconic actors and actresses and determine that those are who the real police are. Like, they're all fat, bald, and like to suck on lollipops.
Right. Yeah.
And that the Teletubbies are really picky eaters.
Yes. It's like a documentary. It's not entertainment.
Right, exactly.
Well, here's where I got really confused. All of a sudden, Zaphod is at the offices of the guide,
yes,
trying to deliver a pizza to Zarniwoop.
Yes. What?
Yeah. It sounds like they're going to arrest him.
Mm-hmm.
They are told to remember to bring an extra half pair of handcuffs.
I like that line.
But wouldn't that just be a bracelet?
Well, yeah, but it would have a chain attached, you know.
But it's an extra pair of half.
Yeah.
An extra half pair. It wasn't bring a triple cuff. They did, it was bring an extra
You're right.
half
That's
pair.
what they said. There you
so
go.
It would just be a bracelet with a chain hanging from it.
Yep. Oh, yes. This whole scene is a little weird.
Because it doesn't have anything to do with the original story, and they're just trying to include the actor who played Zaphod. So they're just put him in the story.
Right, and I mean, they talked about the total perspective vortex. They talked about the artificial universe that he was in.
Yes.
And the fact that he doesn't recognize Van Hull when he walks into the office, I mean, that didn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly, because that's, if he went to see Zarniwoop, well, I don't even know what to say about that, because that whole thing, like you said, was just confusing, trying to figure out what was going on, and there are a lot of inconsistencies.
Right. I mean, you made the point, and I think maybe we should say this earlier, that they took Van Hull, which is the character name from the book, the person that Ford goes to interact with at the Hitchhiker's Guide,
right,
and they gave him a first name of Zarniwoop.
Correct.
Which is the story we know from the previous book, from the other book, where Zaphod is interacting with him. But that does get very confusing, because isn't this the person he would have been meeting to conspiracy with and all this kind of stuff?
That was the whole psychotic break that they told Zaphod he had in the third radio series.
Right.
Because now he's trying to find out what was going on.
Right. And he's still in his artificial universe?
I don't know if he's in his artificial universe, but he does go into it, and that might be when he goes back into Zarniwoop's office. It's confusing. It really is confusing.
But then he does make the one clarifying statement that he was too drunk to understand any of it.
That's right. Yes. So we're going to leave that, and we're going to go to Hawalius.
Ah, yes, Hawalius.
And they now have fast food franchises rather than
Not
only
pizza
takeaway
places.
pizza.
Yep. I love that. And then they show a little video clip of Trisha announcing something that's happening in the middle of next month, so they can kind of set up that whole time paradox thing, which is why Hawalius is having such a hard time.
Correct. But they added a couple little lines to kind of throw in with the, making jokes about or referencing the TV series. But it didn't make any sense. Because Arthur recognized her voice and saw her and asks, is she always dark-haired?
Right.
You know, he says he knows the blonde one and she is sort of American.
Right.
The one that never left with Zaphod is the blonde one.
Mm-hmm.
So he should know the dark-haired one.
Right.
So it's real confusing because neither of these Trillians or Trishas is the one from our previous stories.
Well, as we find out later, maybe
Yeah.
there's more than one.
Yeah, unless Trillian dyed her hair dark.
There you go. Or she's just wearing a wig for the TV or something. I don't know.
Yes, it's a wig. Yeah. And then Ford again is going to sneak into the guide offices, and he's going to capture the security robot. And we know what is happening as he is jumping the logic circuits of the security robot, because he is stating everything he is doing as he is doing it. Okay,
Right,
I'm going to
right.
pry open this little lever, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to put this here. So that's just classic radio series.
Yeah, well, it cleared up all the, the questions about how he would have the technical knowledge. It seemed pretty easy.
Yes. Well, that wasn't the part that I had trouble with. It was the reprogramming the computer. However,
right.
he was able to do that just by the Identities card that he eventually gets. And he just says, hey, approve all these in retrospect. And he wants to name the robot. And this joke, for whatever reason, gets funnier to me the more I think about it. Because he just blurts out a name as an idea for the name of the robot. And he yells out, Emily Saunders. Just like... And then he immediately dismisses it. And he changes it to the name of her dog, which is Colin.
Right.
So,
Colin.
But just yelling out Emily Saunders as the name of the robot, just, to me, the absurdity of it makes that funny.
Yep.
So that was the end of episode 1.
Yay!
Yay! So we get to episode 2. And we go back to Hawalius and Arthur, who's with the old woman in the smelly cave. Or maybe it's the smelly woman in the old cave.
But I do love, I do have to say that this scene that they do, the audio part of the scene is pretty good.
You like that they used fart sound effects as humor?
Yes. Oh, come on now. I mean, I know that a pun you consider lowest form of humor, but a good fart is always a good form of humor.
Yes. It's just too easy.
It is, but I have to tell you, they did a terrific job. I mean, there's farts and burps and other gross noises.
Gurgles,
through that whole scene, and it just made me laugh. What can I say?
I will say that they placed them in the right spot.
There you go.
Yes.
I've got a note here about the old lady and her halitosis. I thought was funny.
They're explaining the Trillian-Trisha parallel by saying that Trillian is the one Arthur lost to Zaphod at the party.
Mm-hmm.
Trisha is the blonde and more American one and did not go with Zaphod.
Right.
But she is now going to get a second chance to leave the planet when the Grebulons arrive and say they have been monitoring her. And here she calls the gardener to have him cut the grass, and he mentions the marks on her lawn and a 3-leaf clover he found. However, there is no context to any of that with the gardener. So unless you read the book, it would be nothing other than just meaningless conversation.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. That's discontinuous.
They don't talk about 3-leaf clover because of the neutrino. They don't talk about the uneven lawnmower blades that she's been asking him to fix. So all of that got cut out, and they just put the conversation, which doesn't mean anything until... So, I don't know. That's another one of those... I don't know why they needed to leave that part in, because there's so much that they cut out that this doesn't mean anything with the part that they cut out. So cut it all.
Oh, but like you say, sometimes they just do service to the big fans,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So then it goes on to talk about the famous lunch breaks at Hitchhiker's Guide.
Right.
And it talks about the different individuals who've gone out on lunch, and they mentioned that the lunch is the center of man's spiritual day.
Yes.
I just thought that was funny.
Right. And then this is actually where they introduce Stagyar Zildago, who was the former editor, who was replaced by Zarniwoop Van Harl, who gives Ford the position of the restaurant column.
Correct.
I did like that Ford said that the future is the same old stuff, only with faster cars and smellier air.
Right.
And Van Harl says that's one future, and Ford needs to think multidimensionally.
Right.
But wouldn't pretty much all of them have faster cars and smellier air? I would say the majority of the futures would have faster cars and smellier air. It's kind of a truth.
That is a truth. But he's thinking of a billion different futures, right?
Correct. And so here's where Ford gets the Identities card and is off to the accounting department. So like the other stories, this is going to jump back and forth between Ford and Arthur and Zaphod and Trisha and Trillian. So I'm just going to tell it the way they had it. So we're going to jump to the Grebulons coming down and visiting Trisha.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they want her to go to Rupert with them.
Right.
And when they are at her house, they see a record. Elvis sings Oasis.
Right.
On this replacement Earth, Elvis may still be alive.
Yep, he's alive and living in Memphis.
In Memphis, right.
That's what they said.
Yep. And then they jump back to Arthur on Hawalius, and he gets the best advice from the man on a pole, and he learns about the boundary conditions and beach houses, just like in the book. They jump to Ford, and again, he hacks into the guide computer and bypasses security. But here, there's a gigantic change from the book, because while Ford is in the virtual universe of the accounting computers, he meets Zaphod.
Right.
Who visited Zarniwoop and probably entered the artificial universe in Zarniwoop's office.
Right.
And Zaphod tells Ford of the Vogons and the guide and the total perspective vortex. So it answered a question that I was going to put in our questionable answer section and edited out.
All right.
Which was, do you think that the Guide Mark II, with its temporal reverse engineering and its being able to see the whole sort of general mishmash, is technology that was adapted from the total perspective vortex? And here they confirm it was.
Okay, makes sense.
Absolutely. And then you were 100% correct that the editor of the guide was a Vogon, where I said that it was only the security that were Vogons. They said that this guy had plastic surgery and he was an altered Vogon. So
right.
You had that one right.
Van Hole. Yeah.
Yes.
And then look, the Lentillas show up again in the universe there, the fictional universe of the accounting department.
Yes, they do. Yes.
And then, so we get to hear my friend Rulalenska back again.
Yes, we do. I think it was in this part where was Zaphod telling Ford about the book and having the voice of the Lentillas? And it's got the voice of the Lentilla chicks, I think is kind of what he said.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he says. Yes, the Lentilla chicks. I did think it was funny when, right after this, we're back with Arthur, and he's on the spaceship that's about to crash, right?
Yes, he is.
And he's flying through, and he's watching programs, and he's complaining about the limited availability of different programs that he watches, and he asks the stewardess what kind of networks might be available in the next few minutes, and she mentions a couple of different ones, but I thought it was funny. She mentions one called Fictional News.
Oh, yes.
Which I thought was hysterical.
Right. So here, the flight that he is on is said to be going to the Lamuella hyperspace jump point, which means Lamuella is not uncharted.
Not uncharted in this one. Right here it says Lamuella is listed.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
And Arthur is intentionally flying through hyperspace, buying an extra seat, hoping that Fenchurch will just suddenly reappear.
Right, and he makes sure to tighten her seatbelt while they take off.
It's just sad. I mean, could you imagine that existence? Just flying through hyperspace, hoping she just reappears?
Yep.
But as we know, he crashes.
Right. Did we make it to part 3, Jeff?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Because first, Ford has to go back to the editor-in-chief's office to replace the identities card.
Oh, okay.
And the Vogons are in the office. And Ford says there is a rocket launcher on a Vogon's shoulder.
Right.
It did not make sense in the book, but it makes even less sense here because Ford yells, "Colin, window!" And Colin breaks the window. Right. So what was the rocket launcher for that broke the window in the book?
I don't know. Yeah, I still think it's very funny when they talk about foolproof.
Yes.
And how they've tried to make these windows foolproof. But in doing that, they underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools.
Yes, right.
which reminds me of squirrel stories.
Wait, so exactly what do you mean by that? Somebody out there had to enjoy the squirrel stories.
I know they did. I know they did. I'm just having fun.
I don't know if I was happy about or okay with eliminating that whole scene about Ford kicking off his shoe and the way he gets to the ledge. It seemed a little bit much to try and include in the radio series because it would have to be him just explaining everything he's doing. Oh no, I'm falling. Oh no, there's Vogons on the ground. Oh no, Colin, come here. Oh no, Colin, you can't go up. Oh no, let me kick off a shoe. Oh, good thing it hit the rocket. It would have been too much of that.
Yes. Some of that narrative would not have been interesting.
No, so they just had him make it to the ledge of the 13th floor without all of that.
Right.
So now we have reached episode 3.
Yay, episode 3.
And in this, we have an entry in the guide for Lamuella. It is on the eastern rim of the galaxy. It is near a hyperspace jump point. And it is partly bisected by a plural zone. The sandwich maker and the art of making sandwiches is explained. And it really made me want a set of his knives.
Doesn't it though?
Don't they just sound like the greatest set of knives?
I know.
Wonderful.
Yes.
It was like the Knife Channel when you're watching 2 a.m.
Yep.
So when Trillian's ship arrives on Lamuella because she's going to see Arthur, old Thrashbarg is doing his chanting. And there's a neat little joke in there about ever since the sandwich maker arrived, they have known on which side their bread is buttered.
Yeah, the side that always falls on the floor first.
That's right. And Trisha is there to introduce Arthur to his daughter, Random, and then leave him there.
Right. I love it.
Here they do a little change in the narrative to tie the radio series into this, because this is a radio series rather than the book. When Ford is on the ledge of the 13th floor, they talk about the reinforced windows.
Right.
But they don't talk about the telephone riots.
No, they don't.
They say that it's due to the Frogstar attack. And
right.
Ford says, "What Frogstar attack?" So like I mentioned, Trillian drops off random, leaves, and here's where they do a good job, and they do this better than the book. So in the book, out of the blue, Arthur just goes, I don't love you. I don't know you.
Right.
And was like, wow. Like, that was just a little weird.
Coming in hot.
Here, Random says, now don't tell me you love me. And he's like, I don't love you. I don't even know you. So it was the right comment in the right place, other than just out of the blue. So always excited when they do something correct and really improve a story that was probably what he meant, but it just didn't come out that way.
Right.
Here's another little part that I think has implications that weren't in the book, and I don't even know if they're real implications, because the Grebulons have lost their minds. So they have no idea what's going on.
That's right.
So when Tricia gets to Rupert with the Grebulons, she asks them if she can videotape the interviews.
Right.
And she is told that she can because they have nothing to hide.
Right.
Then they cut to Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz, who's laughing and smiling and says, ha ha ha, nothing to hide. Like, they're this integral part of his plan. And that they know it. But they don't know it.
No, they don't.
So they don't have anything to hide. Because they have no idea that they're pawns in the Mark II's plan.
Or, yeah, and I mean, along those lines, well, we know where it's going, because obviously we know the story here, at least this part that's coming up. The other part that's kind of a little annoying in that respect is that they're talking about collapsing the entire infinity of Earths.
Yes.
And this one Earth being blown up by the Grebulons is not the activity that would cause that to happen. But they infer or imply that it is. So that bothered me.
Well, you want to know what bothered me?
Sure.
Is that I didn't know that in this 5th radio series was yet another Vogon Jeltz poem that could have been included in our poetry episode.
Oh gosh, yes, I thought a lot about that. I was going to write notes and talk about the poem, but I didn't do it. I guess we're going to have to bring it up because it was new to both of us, so we did get caught off guard, and it's important.
Yes. There is a new poem that he writes, and he says it's about irony. It doesn't sound like you wrote it down.
I didn't.
But I did.
Oh, okay,
so
good.
Does that mean I have to be the one that performs?
I guess, because I didn't write it down. I mean, I seriously considered it, and I thought, I wonder if this is like extra content we're going to bring back to us.
We can't edit it into our old episode, so we're going to include it here. And if any other poems pop up in anything else, we will include them. Because...
I will make a concerted effort to be prepared to do a poem the next time.
Okay, you get the next one. So here's Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz's poem about irony. O globet of dribble oozing from the upturned corner of my mouth, you look to me like you should be the thing that droppeth from the cloud. A tiny bit of thee is stuck upon my lip, a little more is up my nose. Some had adhered to my hip. My eyes are open and glassy. My snot is thick and green, but from my ears something obscene appears, and I think it might be me.
How ironic.
How ironic.
Oh my gosh. And I didn't feel any pain at all at your recitation. You must work on your imagery here because I should have felt more pain.
You are in the wrong chair. You are in the wrong chair.
I got it.
Yeah. All right. So then we're going to jump back to Lamuella, and Arthur and Random are having a discussion where we learn that the war Trillian went to cover never happened because the reconnaissance ship never arrived.
Right.
However, Trillian never came back for Random.
No. Oh my gosh.
Where Trillian had been one of my favorite characters who never got enough airtime, so to speak.
Right.
She's not looking good in this whole series.
No, she's kind of flopping around a bit.
With this episode here.
I want more Rula.
Yes.
Bring me the lentillas.
When Thrashbarg comes in a tiff to tell Arthur about the package delivery, and Random is making jokes about the fake two-headed fish, Thrashbarg calls her a wench. And lived.
No, that generally does not happen.
No.
At least with a sharp rock in your pocket.
That's right. Yeah, she's always got it ready. So here they condense things a little bit. After her tirade, Random runs off to live in the woods, and Arthur did not see that she took the package with her. So she didn't sneak off with it when he was gone. She just had a fit and left, and somehow palmed the package. As you know from our talk about the book, I'm not a real fan of the part where they calibrated the book for Random.
Right.
The more I experience it, the more I don't like it.
Oh, really?
Because,
quite
simply, after all of the annoying calibration, it ended up exactly where it started. The topper is, it asked a question to find out the direction time flowed last, after asking all the other questions and getting answers. So how did it know which question the answers belonged to?
Oh, there you go. Well, I mean, you got to assume there's a default condition, right? I mean, if these were in fact created by the Vogons, they live in a linear life and have a certain frequency that they would have started off. So, makes sense to me.
Can you hear me? What? Oh, you can. Well, then she goes, lemons. And she says, oh, you think time flows that way? No, see, so all of, so it's, that's the first question it should have asked. Before
it seems logical, but like I said, I can see that they create a default condition for the guide. Yeah. It starts off in the condition that the manufacturers created.
How many of me do you see? One. Good. Stop there. Why did it have to do this? Now I see you in infinity. Which just drives me crazy. So Ford arrives and Random hits him in the head with a rock and takes his ship and goes to Earth. Then they tell the biggest lie of the entire series.
All right.
At the end of episode 3, when the guide Mark II is talking and you have Rula Lenska, so Rula Lenska lied to you. She said that the next episode would be the last episode ever of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Well, I'm sure that they thought it was.
I will disagree with that. Based on the ending of episode 4.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that kind of sets it up. But we're not supposed to talk about that.
No, we're not going to talk about that.
Okay. Yet.
So, here's episode 4.
Episode 4. Hey, you know what I liked about episode 4? I love this part where they start talking about the first third of your life and how the things that happen in the first third of your life are new and exciting and you can get a job in it. And the final third, you just want everything to stop.
Right. What is all this craziness?
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, that was a perfect description of the thirds of your life. And beginning of episode 4 is where we are filled in on what is going on because Ford explains everything to Arthur.
Right.
And here I thought you would have picked something out that I found kind of funny. And because you kind of mentioned it in the episode about the book and kept it in here but they changed it. Do you know what
Okay.
I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
They don't say it's all badger spit.
Oh, right. I do recall.
Arthur uses the term, "You are badger sputally saying all of this." So I thought that was a nice little twist.
Yep.
I'm like, did he say badger sputally?
Yes, he did. And I just love Ford's line when they're talking about random heading off into the galaxy, and Ford says to Arthur, well, can we feel sorry for the galaxy later?
That's right. Yes. And then here is an unnecessary change that didn't make a whole lot of sense from the standpoint of what was in the book and how they're doing it now. So Ford still tells Arthur that he jumped out of the window that second time.
Right.
And he landed in a passing town car whose pilot accidentally ejected.
Right.
In the book, that's the ship that he continued to Earth with.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In this, he bought the RW6 that he showed up in with the Dino card from the guide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what restaurant did he review to get that purchase approved? Like the Elvis one that's coming up makes sense because it was a tip at the bar. So he was in a car. I don't know why he needed to get out of the town car and go buy another car, but I guess he wanted that RW6.
Oh, he did indeed.
It's supposed to be something.
Mm-hmm.
So after a little while, the migration of the perfectly normal beasts start, and
another variation from the story, because here's where Arthur is supposedly the one who realizes and recognizes that this is a way off the planet.
Right. And they do a pretty good job, but something that was missing that I didn't realize was missing from the book is old Thrashbarg was there and told him about the pick-a-bird. Mm-hmm. But where were the other hunters?
Yeah.
They didn't ever say that in the background were all of these other hunters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also made me think, because in the book it really didn't seem to happen. I guess it could have happened this way, but it didn't seem like it in my mind. Is in this, it appeared that the pick-a-bird fascinated the beast and it became docile. And would it just come over and lay down or something?
Yeah, basically it just stood still and let them get on.
They got it,
Yep.
So how come they're not doing that and leading them into a pen and then breeding their own perfectly normal beast?
Oh, now you're just overthinking the whole thing.
Why do they have to hunt them if they can easily fascinate them and get them docile long enough to bring them into a corral? I'm just saying they could have their own, and then they could still hunt. But there's going to be a day that migration doesn't happen.
There you go. They should plan ahead.
They should plan ahead.
Oh my gosh. But I still got a kick out of the little line that Arthur's complaining about how rank the smell of the perfectly normal beasts are, and Ford says, well, then you've never met Eccentrica Golumbits.
Which I found kind of a cheap joke, and I didn't really enjoy that joke. I found it kind of funny, and I understand why they did it, but I think of Eccentrica Golumbits, I've always had her more in the higher class escorts rather than the rank-smelling street escorts. So I wasn't a fan of that joke. But, you know.
All right. Fair
I
enough.
understood the need for it. So they jump over to Trisha, who's reviewing her footage that she took on Rupert with the Grebulons. And I found it funny how all the Grebulons adapted names from TV shows.
Oh, yeah.
Many of them Star Trek.
Right. Captain Picard, Geordie LaForge, and how much they love the Tribbles, the classic episode.
I think Lieutenant Kojak, too, I think.
Yeah. Great.
And then a little later, we learned that they cannot remember the names they pick and have to pick a new name out of the TV guide every morning. So they've got very little retained memory after they wake up.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
So one of the things that I thought I really enjoyed about the way they did the audio show, I think it might even have been in the original book, but they talk about Arthur and Ford going to a hotel, and Ford buys the zoo, London Zoo, and lets everybody go, or lets all the animals, gets all the animals released from the zoo.
Yes.
Then he orders an insane amount of frogua.
Right.
And Arthur says to him, "Don't you think that's a little cruel to the geese?" And he says, "Well, you can't care about every damn thing."
That's right. Yes, right.
And that's why I think it's funny. Ford and I have the same opinion of geese.
Yes. You've made that clear a couple of times, I believe. So Random is looking for her mother on Earth. And a man tells her to step away from the spaceship.
Right.
And she threatens him with the rock.
Right.
Do you know who that man was?
No.
It was Bang Bang.
How do you know it was Bang Bang and not Shooty?
Well, I knew it was one of them, so I looked up in the cast. I went online and looked up the cast.
Oh, really?
The cast.
The guy that
somebody is as Bang Bang. Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the same actor, who played Bang Bang in the first radio series, plays Bang Bang here. The guide asks if she wants the guy to make that guy go away permanently. I guess kill him. And Random says no. And just like that, the guide says, "Well, then I'm needed elsewhere," and disappears.
Right.
But then it made a sound effect like it flew away, not like disappeared out of existence.
Well, I guess that's a flapping of the bird thing. They're trying to,
Yeah. So I think again that you were correct that this guide left the Earth before its destruction.
You're about to talk about it, and this has to be my absolute favorite part of the entire audio series that we've listened to.
Okay.
Coming up, and that's the bar and grill.
Yes, I am going to talk about the bar and grill because what I liked about that was the song. So I don't know what you're going to talk about. Were you going to talk about the song?
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay, so we know the scene where Ford is negotiating with Elvis for the ship.
Yes.
Ford walks back to the bar and he's talking with Arthur, and we get to hear Elvis as he sets up and starts to sing.
But it wasn't Love Me Tender like in the book.
Nope, wasn't Love Me Tender. It was the cricket song.
Yes.
And I just absolutely loved this part of the audio book. I mean, that was fantastic that he's singing the cricket song.
And it does a good job too.
Oh yeah, it sounds beautiful. Way better than I could sing it.
So now I want to jump back in time. In the book, when Trillian came to Lamuella to meet Arthur, there was singing coming from the sandwich maker's hut. And that's how she knew where Arthur was.
Right.
They didn't say that here, but in the background, Arthur was singing the cricket song. So they're getting a lot of mileage out of this song.
Isn't that awesome? Oh, it's just incredible. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Everything's coming to a close. They all end up at the club, Stavro Mueller's second club, Beta. And again, the character of Agrajag is the audiobook recording of Douglas Adams.
I know. I still think that's fantastic that they did that.
It's so fantastic. Makes me so happy that he did the books too. Read his own book. And after, like you were talking about earlier, where Trillian knows what's going to happen, is trying to get everybody to leave, the gray gun turrets point at the Earth, and the Earth is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Since this was said to be the last ever episode of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you think it would have just ended here because this is how the book ended.
Right.
But it doesn't end here.
Right.
I think there is a whole bonus episode's worth of discussion about what comes after the destruction of Earth. What do you think?
I have to say that the last 11 minutes of the quintessential phase of this book is so densely packed with
yes, to say the least.
and information that to parse it out will probably take us enough to fill an entire bonus episode.
I agree with you, because I think there's more information in this last 11 minutes than the previous 3 episodes. And trying to figure out exactly what they mean and how it all relates and fits together. So that's what you folks have to look forward to.
Awesome.
So our bonus episode in the middle of this month is going to be talking about the epilogue, is what I'm going to call it, of the quintessential phase.
I can't wait. It's really kind of fun, but it's really very dense. For 11 minutes worth of audio, it's really got a lot to say.
And I'd say it's a little bit infuriating in some points too.
100%.
It will have every emotion that you have will come out in this epilogue. So, Bryan, since they all know what to look forward to next bonus episode, I think it's time to say goodbye. So, say goodbye, Bryan.
All right, Jeff. I'll say goodbye. And in deference to our bonus episode, I'd just like to say good night, Fenchurch.
Right. Yeah, spoilers. Thank you for listening to Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea. Look for us the first Thursday of every month for a full episode. We will also release a bonus episode later in the month. A very special thanks goes out to Luke, Max, Greg, and Tim Lesnick for arranging and performing our opening theme. We would also like to thank our talented friends and family for their voice work on our introductions and commercials. A special thank you to Dr. Julie Lesnick for our opening. And you can thank Bryan Campbell for your acid flashback. Visit our website at digitalwatchesareaprettyneatidea.buzzsprout.com, where you can find links to all my Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inspired t-shirt designs. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube as Digital Watches Are a Pretty Neat Idea, on Instagram as Watches Idea Podcast, and on Twitter at Watches Idea. If you'd like to contact us, our email is digitalwatchespodcast@gmail.com.
This has been a Froods for Thought production.